Alice and I are always looking to be more healthy, and we were just talking about how fasting is one of the best ways to do that, but it's so hard. But the great thing about Prolon is that's not what you're doing. It's not that you're not eating for 5 days. Instead, you're using their science-backed program to convince your body you're fasting.
You guys, this 5-day program really is amazing. It comes beautifully packaged and it does all the thinking for you. Each day is its own box. And by following their program, I know I just feel so much better. And I can't wait to experience Prolong Next Gen and continue to see results. For a limited time, you can be first in line to experience the new Next Gen at special savings. Prolong is offering the Prosecutors listeners 15% off site-wide plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day program. Just visit prolonlife.com/prosecutors. That's PROLONLIFE.com/prosecutors to claim your 15% discount and your bonus gift. prolonlife.com/prosecutors.
Hi everyone, this is Elise from True Crime Cat Lawyer. I'm joined as always by my co-host Winston the Cat. Every other Thursday, Winston and I bring you a new story about a murder, disappearance, or serial killer with a special focus on cases from our hometown, the Pacific Northwest. This includes Idaho, Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. For more information, you can find us on Twitter at True Crime Cat Law or on Instagram at True Crime Cat Lawyer, and feel free to send us an email at truecrimecatLawyer@gmail.com. We hope you'll give us a listen.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on The Prosecutors, Granger Taylor was a mechanical genius, but did he also go to space? Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my cyclopean co-host, Alice.
That was so many syllables, Brett, and you didn't even trip over it once.
So many. It's possible it's actually pronounced cyclopean, but
I actually
who's here to argue, right?
No idea what that means. Does it mean I'm a cyclops?
It does not. It actually usually describes buildings, and it comes from Cyclops because it's like these massive stone structures that, people thought were built by giants. So
does it mean I am a giant person?
It means you're yes, exactly. You're giant in your awesomeness. Think of it that way. Your awesomeness is so great, it's hard to contain it in one person.
I love that word. That is an awesome word because I want to be a cyclops.
There you go. Don't, be careful what you wish for, Alice.
That's right. Now, you guys may all be thinking, Brett sounds different. And that's because Brett is incredibly ill right now and should be sleeping and not recording a podcast, but he loves October so much and he loves these creepy cases so much. He said, no, I must wake up and record. So, Brett, you're a trooper.
Incredibly ill is a little bit of a stretch, but pardon my scratchy throat.
Well, I'm glad to talk to you because I've missed you since you have been sick, but also glad we are recording from remote locations.
Yes, exactly. So Alice doesn't get sick as well. Being sick has gotten me out of some work I was supposed to do with Alice, so she had to do it all by herself. So it actually turned out to be kind of a net positive for me, but I'm just saying.
Well, he's picked up a lot of my slack, so it's barely even right now.
Well, Alice, we do have an interesting case today, one from Canada, from our northern neighbor. This is our second Canadian case we've done in pretty, quick
Succession.
Our first one was incredibly popular. Like, people loved
I
it.
know.
And I
The
agree. It was
Canadians
such an
came
interesting
out.
case. The Canadians did come out. I love Canadians, by the way.
Yes.
Some of my best friends are from Canada, and they are just the most polite people in the world.
Yeah. Don't love your bacon, gotta say. American bacon, way better than Canadian bacon, but whatever. We can come together over poutine, which everyone loves. Well, Alice, today we're talking about Granger Taylor, the disappearance of Granger Taylor, and this is an interesting one. We have promised you before that we're going to do some cases where aliens are a viable theory, and if there has ever been a case that could have been aliens, this one might be it. Alice, do you remember the movie Safety Not Guaranteed? Did you ever see that?
I did not. That's a great title.
It's a great title. It's a movie about a guy who claims to build a time machine, and he puts a classified ad in the newspaper that reads, "Wanted, somebody to go back in time with me. This is not a joke. P.O. Box 91, Ocean View, Washington, 99393. You'll get paid after we get back. Must bring your own weapons. I have only done this once before. Safety not guaranteed."
That's awesome.
It is awesome. It's a great hook for a movie, right? And it is a good movie. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. And when I think about Granger Taylor's story, I sort of thought about that. And I wonder if Granger Taylor may have influenced that movie a little bit. But in Granger's case, it wasn't that he was going to go back in time. He was going to go to space. Before we get started, there is a great Vice article by Tyler Hooper, and he has done a ton of reporting on this case. You can also hear him discuss this case on the Nighttime podcast, which is a great podcast that has a lot of great cases. If you guys haven't listened to that before, you should check it out. And we will have a link to it in the show notes if you just can't get enough of Granger Taylor. Well, I think that is enough introduction. Let's dive into the story. So the 6'3", 240-pound man cut quite the figure, but everyone who knew Granger Taylor knew that he was, in many ways, a big teddy bear and an absolute genius. His understanding of machines and mechanical engineering was so uncanny as to be almost inexplicable. You would think that someone who understood the workings of machines as well as he did, and we're going to give you some examples of that here in a minute, would have spent a lot of time in school. This would be the kind of guy who, has a doctorate in engineering or something. But it all came natural for him. He actually didn't have much use for school. And in fact, he had dropped out by the 8th grade. But growing up in the small town of Duncan on Vancouver Island, he found plenty of other opportunities to display his immense talents. He was barely a teenager. In fact, I think he was only 12 when he restored an old car to perfect functioning. And he wasn't much older when he rebuilt the engine on a bulldozer that he would actually loan out to his neighbors for their projects around the home. And his exploits only grew more extraordinary. And Alice, as someone who can't do anything and barely even understands how the internal combustion engine works, to me, this is just amazing on another level.
No, I think that's exactly right, Brett. I mean, this is no joke, I can barely unscrew the battery covers on children's toys to change the battery for my kids' toys, much less try to fix an engine.
And it was one of those things when the pandemic started and you're like, is civilization going to fall? Because if civilization falls, I'm in a lot of trouble because I can't actually do anything. I'm an absolutely worthless person outside of sort of our current civilized state.
Oh, absolutely. There's no way I can outrun any tiger, in another, dimension. I can't build anything with my hands. I certainly cannot build shelter, and I'm a terrible hunter and gatherer. So there's completely out of luck. Now, at some point, Granger found an old steam engine rotting on an abandoned railway in the forest behind his home. The engine had been in the forest since at least the 1940s, but Granger thought it could be saved. You saw all of those other machinery that he had brought back to life. Now, it took him 2 years, but his work was so good that the government of British Columbia bought it, and it's displayed to this day in the BC Forest Discovery Center in Duncan. But his crowning achievement was when he fully restored a P-40 Kitty Hawk, a legendary World War II fighter plane that he would later sell for tens of thousands of dollars to a collector.
Yeah, which is crazy. I mean, that's just insane. And the Kitty Hawk in the P-40, it's, you've seen those planes from World War II that have like the shark teeth on the front. It's one of those. So just you can already see that this guy has this incredible ability that sort of defies reason. I mean, I guess he was just really good at figuring out how things worked, even though he'd never had any formal education or not much formal education. He could just sort of look at these things and figure it out. It kind of reminds me of Einstein. I mean, Einstein obviously did have a lot of education, and some of his struggles in various classes have been overstated. But Einstein often, the way he came up with some of his ideas, it wasn't so much like you might think of science today. He very much would sort of sit in a room and think about things, and he would think about the way things worked and the way things had to work, and he would visualize the way these complex physics ideas had to come together for the universe to be the way it was, and then he would sort of work backwards from that to the mathematical formula. And so it kind of reminds me of that. I feel like Granger was the kind of guy who he could look at a machine, and even if he'd never seen it before, he could figure out how it had to work, and he could figure out what had to be wrong with it that was keeping it from working, and he was able to use that sort of innate ability to repair something that maybe he'd never even seen before.
And that's so interesting, Brett, because I can't tell you how many times I have sat and stared at what to me was an impossible legal argument, thinking if I just look at the words long enough, I can figure it out. And it doesn't often work for me. And that's something I studied extensively, right? Like I have a degree in understanding the law. And here he is. I doubt he's ever taken a course on how to fix up a Kitty Hawk airplane, but yet he was able to figure it out by working his way up to this type of machinery. And it's paying off, right? He isn't just good with his hands. He's gotten national attention to the point where he's making money off of this type of tinkering that he's doing. Now, Robert Keller, one of Granger's best friends, describes him as a genius, a mechanical savant that could build anything, fix anything, and understood the inner workings of machines on an almost supernatural level. It was, Keller would later say, a, quote, genius bordering on insanity. We've heard that about multiple people throughout history, haven't we, Brett?
Absolutely.
Now, Granger would soon turn that genius or insanity to the subject of aliens and space travel. Finally, a case directly on point of our most popular theory of it was aliens.
Exactly.
It only took 1.5 years, but here we are. He spent a year building a mock spaceship out of some old satellite dishes. Before he was finished, it was something of like a clubhouse with a television and a wood-burning stove inside. Granger was special, but nothing could prepare those who knew him from what happened on November 29th, 1980.
So yeah, let's turn to the timeline and get into this really, truly insane couple of weeks. So it's late October, early November 1980. Now, Robert Keller is actually the son of one of Granger's old friends. And Robert, much like Granger, didn't really have any use for school. So he had dropped out of school in 8th grade as well. And when Granger came around to see his friend and his friend mentioned that, Granger took a liking to him because he saw a connection with him. And he said, hey, why don't you start working with me? I can teach you a lot of things. And so he and Robert would spend every day together. Granger would come by, he'd pick Robert up, they'd work on the various projects that Granger was working on. He became a big brother, another father, a best friend to Robert. And Robert has said he was one of the most influential people in his life, and has even said that were it not for Granger, he probably would have ended up either in jail or dead. So they're good friends, very close, and Granger shared everything with him. So it is that October, early November 1980, and he tells Robert that he has been having these incredibly vivid dreams, unlike anything he had ever experienced before. And he says that in these dreams, beings from another planet have been speaking to him telepathically through his dreams. Now, at first, he doesn't think anything of them. He just thinks these are really interesting dreams, crazy dreams. He must be paying too much attention to space or something, and it's totally sort of infected his mind, and now he's even having these weird dreams. But day after day after day, he is having these dreams, and they're getting more and more vivid and more detailed until finally Granger confides in Robert that he has been given an offer by these beings, unlike any offer that's ever been given to anyone on the world, that they will take him onto their spaceship. And they have said to him that they've recognized his sort of incredible mechanical skills. They want to put those to use, and they want to reward him for that by taking him on a voyage that no one's ever experienced, a 42-month trip on this spaceship through the galaxy. And in fact, the aliens have told him precisely when they will arrive. November 29th, 1980. But you can't just have a spaceship show up in the middle of a town and pick somebody up on, the corner in front of the coffee shop. So they will come under the cover of a storm unlike any the area has ever seen, one dark enough and loud enough to conceal their approach. So this is a pretty detailed story we got here from Granger, and it's pretty obvious to Robert that he absolutely believes this story to be true.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound like a dream in the sense that there are specifics like 42 months of a trip, the date that they will come, and how they will come and get him. Those are all very specific things. If you study the psychology, I don't know if that's the right word, but the psychology of dreams, there's a reason that voices and images are kind of blurry. It's because it's the way the brain processes different things through its synapses. And so that's why there's a dreamlike quality. That's why there's that description, because the brain is quite literally looking through that lens to process things. But these types of dreams don't typically occur with such specificity.
Today, in one of my fever dreams, I had this dream that school was getting ready to start. I mean, it's September. It's already started. And I didn't even know what classes I was going to take. And so I woke up in this terror that I wasn't ready for school, and I didn't even know what my classes were. And then I was like, wait a second, I haven't gone to school in 15 years, 20 years, however long it's been. So I don't know what that dream was about, but it might have had more to do with my illness than anything else.
This just proves how sick you are, and you're still recording right now.
Yeah, exactly. So if I say something crazy, just ignore it. It's the disease talking. According to my home COVID test, it's not COVID, so... Well, I don't know what it is, but anyway, so Granger, he clearly believes this. I mean, whatever's going on, he thinks it's true. And so he starts organizing his affairs. He's decided he's going on this trip. He's taking up the aliens on their offer. He gets his will in order to make sure that all of his, proceeds will be distributed as he wants them to be. But Granger doesn't think he's going to die. He's just leaving. So in the will, he actually changes the word death and deceased to departure and departed.
He's a lawyer.
Yeah, to indicate that this is not about my death. This is about me leaving. And once I leave, you can dispose of my property appropriately. So November 29th comes, and Robert meets up with Granger as he does every single day, every single morning. And Granger reminds him, this is the day. This is the day that I'm going to be leaving. And Robert, he looks up in the sky and he notices, it's a little overcast. Not that unusual for this area of Canada, but it doesn't look like there's going to be a storm. And certainly not the kind that Granger has suggested is going to come. But Granger says, don't worry, the storm is coming. And he is right. Before the day is over, the area will be inundated with a storm the likes of which no one has seen in living memory. The news will dub it the storm of the century.
Alice, before we continue, I want to talk about one of our favorite sponsors, PDS Debt. Now, I know many of you feel like old debt or past financial decisions are holding you back in life. Our sponsor, PDS Debt, has customized 0% interest programs for anyone struggling with credit cards, personal or student loans, medical bills, collections, or any other type of debt. PDS Debt is so confident they can save you money. They're giving our listeners with eligible accounts
$25 Visa gift cards for completing the assessment online. Bad and fair credit are accepted, and anyone can start saving now. Go to pdsdebt.com/TP and find out how to resolve your debt now.
And we've been talking about PDS debt on the show for a few weeks now and have had multiple emails come in from listeners who have started to get their debt under control. And we want to share with you one of those emails that we think many of us can relate to. Jennifer from Texas said, "After hearing about PDS debt for the third time on your podcast, I knew I finally needed to look into getting my debt taken care of. My work hours were cut during COVID, and after living off of my credit cards, I found myself in over $20,000 of debt. The credit card interest rates were over 20%, and I could barely keep up with the minimum monthly payments. I went to pdsdebt.com and completed the quick debt assessment. That afternoon, I talked to an account manager who customized a solution to get one low monthly payment for all of my accounts. My monthly payments were cut in half, and I will be debt-free in 24 months. I'm also paying 0% interest and saving over $8,000 that would have otherwise been wasted on high interest and fees. Thank you for all that you do and having a sponsor like PDS Debt on the show." So that is an amazing testimonial from Jennifer. If you're facing the same situation, you want to see how much you can save, go complete the quick and easy debt assessment at www.pdsdebt.com/TP. That's pdsdebt.com/TP. Those with eligible accounts will receive a $25 Visa gift card just for looking into your savings solutions. Take back your financial freedom today by visiting pdsdebt.com/TP.
Get this, adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Wondery. greenlight.com/Wondery.
Bombas makes the most comfortable socks, underwear, and T-shirts.
Warning, Bombas are so absurdly comfortable you may throw out all your other clothes.
Sorry, do we legally have to say that?
No, this is just how I talk, and I really love my Bombas.
They do feel that good. And they do good, too. One item purchased equals one item donated.
To feel good and do good, go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code Wondery for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code Wondery at checkout.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Now, what strikes me so far is Granger's absolute confidence in what he knows to be true. I know a lot of people, when they have dreams, they doubt what the interpretation of the dream is or whether they remembered it correctly or what it could mean. Here, Granger is one-track mind. He changes his will. He even tells Robert he's not afraid of ridicule from Robert, right? He's like, today is the day. Don't worry. He knows what's going to happen. And that confidence continues. Sometime that morning, Granger writes a letter to his parents, and it reads, "Dear Mother and Father, I have gone away to walk aboard an alien spaceship, as recurring dreams assured a 42-month interstellar voyage to explore the vast universe, then return. I am leaving behind all my possessions to you, as I will no longer require the use of any. Please use the instructions in my will as a guide to help. Love, Granger." Now, Granger leaves not only the note behind, but around $10,000 in cash. Let's stop really quick. That letter could not be more straightforward.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there is no beating around the bush. He doesn't waste words. The whole letter is, 3 sentences, and it's matter of fact. It's a set of instructions. It's not tearful. It's not, "I will miss you." It's not, "Don't be afraid." It's literally, there's nothing to discuss. This is what's happening, and I'll be back in 42 months. And here are instructions for my property.
And it's really interesting because you read this letter and you look at what's left behind, and it feels like two of the theories that we will talk about kind of go out the window, right? I mean, number one, if you're going to leave on your own, if this is all a cover for running off and starting that bar on the beach we talk about in every one of these cases, leaving $10,000 in cash behind, not a great start, right? Like, you probably want to take the cash. And then the letter itself, the note, nothing about this note feels like a suicide note, right? I mean, this doesn't feel like Granger's going to go commit suicide and has decided to leave a note. Maybe it is some sort of weird suicide note, but it doesn't feel that way. It fits with everything else Granger has said for the last month.
Absolutely. Now, at 6:30 that night, Granger swings by Bob's Grill in his Pepto-Bismol pink Datsun truck. That is also an awesome ride for someone who could probably drive anything because he can fix up anything. But he likes to make a statement.
He painted it pink himself, so.
he likes to make a statement. He is wearing a light jacket and is not at all dressed for the gale force winds and massive storm rolling through town. Remember, the storm that is dubbed the storm of the century. It is the last time he or this Pepto-Bismol pink truck are ever seen again. And in fact, no trace was ever found of Granger. That is, until 6 years later. Maybe.
So that brings us to March 1986, 6 years later, and forestry workers working on a mountain near town called Mount Prevost discover what appears to be a blast crater on the side of the mountain, not that far away from where Granger lived. Now, the vehicle that they find in this blast crater, that they believe to be in this blast crater, appears to have at one time been a truck. But whatever happened to this vehicle was so destructive that there are only small pieces of it even left to be found. A wheel from this vehicle is located 60 feet up in a tree. So whatever happened blew this wheel so high up that it landed 60 feet up in a tree. There did appear to be human remains within this crater, but like the truck, there's not much left of them. We have very small bone fragments that the police could not say definitively belong to a man or a woman. And although Granger's truck was most assuredly pink, the debris the police found was blue. But there was a license plate that went with Granger's truck that was found embedded in a tree as if it had been on this vehicle and sort of blasted into the tree. And so the existence of that license plate led the police, the Royal Mounted Canadian Police in this case, or the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, I guess, to decide that this was Granger's truck and those were Granger's remains. But despite that fact, people to this day have doubted whether or not the truck they found on that mountainside was actually Granger's truck and whether or not those bones actually belonged to Granger, or if something more mysterious than what is admittedly a mystery, even if it is Granger's truck, happened on that mountainside in 1980.
Mind blown. I have no idea. I mean, this is just such an odd sight.
This is an awesome story. I love it.
It is an awesome story, but, it's so interesting because immediately what comes to mind when you say that a wheel was located 60 feet up in a tree is not necessarily that a blast happened from below, but rather it coming from above and that it got caught on the way down. I mean, 60 feet up is high up. Those of you who have seen, car accidents, obviously debris can scatter very far, but 60 feet straight up defying gravity is just unlikely.
Sounds like a photon torpedo or a phaser blast to me.
Right. We'll see. Now, let's talk about some unusual aspects, even though many of you may be thinking everything we've said so far is unusual. Well, it gets weirder. You see, there was a map on the back of the note that Granger left for his parents. He had drawn this rudimentary map. No one has been able to decipher what this map depicts. However, his friends have indicated that Granger would often jot crude maps down on random sheets of paper, and they believe this map had nothing to do with his disappearance, rather that he always doodled on paper and he used one of these doodle sheets as the paper to write his note on.
Which is possible, but kind of interesting that there just so happens to be a map on the back of the letter saying that he is going to go, on this interstellar voyage. Unfortunately, no one really knows what the map means. It would be interesting if that map led to where the truck was eventually found, or where a truck was eventually found. But people who've looked at that, and obviously people spend a lot of time studying these things, really haven't been able to figure out anything definitive about it. So I think it's one of those things that will remain a mystery whether it's related to this case or not.
Well, and here's the interesting thing. Granger's, he's described as genius bordering on insanity. So he may not think of things that, people thinking in kind of a rational, methodical way may think. So he may not think of anything of this kind of doodle on the back of a letter. But I think he would have noticed, because we had talked about how straightforward his letter was. His letter was 3 sentences long, straightforward, no mystery whatsoever. Mother, father, I'm going on a spaceship, 42 months, we'll be back, don't need my belongings. I left instructions for it. He was very clear. There was no mystery about it. And even he has to know that if someone were to disappear, even if they explained why they were going to disappear and for how long in a letter, his parents would be searching for him, at least at the beginning, to think what's going on, what's happened, that he's never done this before, he's never gotten on a spaceship before, that they would be looking for more clues. I think he was trying to be so straightforward because he knew his parents would be looking for clues, and he wanted to tell them there's no clues to look for. So the fact that this map exists, I don't think is just an accident, right? I don't think he just was that careless that he used an old piece of paper, when I think he was so straightforward to help his parents out, to say, don't worry, don't be looking into more meaning. So I think the map, that points me to thinking the map means something.
No, I mean, that makes sense to me. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. And it's a pretty important thing you're doing when you're leaving the letter, essentially the goodbye letter to your parents. Would you really just write it on a random piece of paper that has random things in the back of it? I don't know. So I kind of tend to agree with you. I think it might have something to do with it, but because of the way Granger's mind worked, I don't necessarily know that if he looked at that map, he would probably be able to determine exactly what it means. But I don't know that anybody else who looks at it is going to be able to make that determination.
There's also the question of drug use. Granger liked to smoke marijuana and use LSD. And in fact, he'd been using LSD as much as every day in the weeks leading up to his disappearance. And LSD is a type of drug that kind of alters the mind. Some people say it opens your mind up to new experiences, to feel things deeper. Actually, a lot of people who are described as, genius bordering on insanity have admitted to experimenting with LSD to open up their minds to new concepts that are not constrained by the methodical way of thinking in the quote unquote normal state of the mind.
Yeah, we got an email from somebody recently who was very upset that we suggested that LSD might be involved in a murder, even though we weren't the ones suggesting it. There was the prosecution doing so, but they made the argument that LSD actually does open your mind up to sort of all these other experiences, and it's not the kind of thing that would make you kill anybody, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. Never done LSD personally. You guys can write in with all your LSD experiences, I guess. But I think this is kind of a two-sided thing. On the one hand, maybe it makes you think he's imagining things. On the other hand, maybe it is opening his mind up to stuff, and we'll talk about that more in a second.
I mean, but we will note that, whenever someone is on mind-altering substances, they do act in unpredictable ways, and they can do things that may seem rational in their altered state of mind, but make no sense, safety-wise or any otherwise, or otherwise, in a kind of unaltered state of mind. So that's why we mention it, because it does cause people. This is why you hear of people getting into accidents or having fatal errors when their mind is altered on drugs.
So I think the sort of main question that you got to be asking yourself at this point, and we've already sort of alluded to it, is were those Granger's remains? Because if they were, then at least part of this mystery is solved. Maybe not all of it, certainly not all of it, but at least we would know where Granger is. And you might think, well, this is easy to figure out. Let's do some DNA testing on those bones. Well, there was no DNA testing done on the bones because at the time, such testing wasn't readily available. So you might think, well, that's fine. Let's test them now. Well, here's the thing. In the years that followed this, all the evidence was lost. All the bones, all the pieces of the truck, everything related to this case was lost. It's all disappeared. It's vanished into ether. Nobody knows where it is. And the only people who ever saw it were the officers who recovered it. And as you can imagine, in a case involving whether or not someone got onto an alien spaceship and flew across the galaxy, this has led many to wonder whether any of this evidence really existed, and conspiracy theories abound. Now, I don't know why the police would have made this up, is the one thing I'll say about it. Like, Granger had disappeared. Nobody was really looking for him. I don't know that you needed to create sort of a explanation for the mysterious thing that happened to Granger 6 years after it happened, such that you would, fake this event. Unfortunately, whatever happened, we can't prove it one way or the other. So there were a lot of assumptions made that day about whose truck this was and whether or not it was Granger's and whether or not it was his bones. But unfortunately, because all the evidence is lost, all we can really do is speculate.
Yeah, this doesn't seem like the situation where so much public pressure was on the missing persons case, right? Because he left this letter that for some reason, the police were pressured into making some developments in the case. We've seen that in cases nowadays, right? People demand answers, family members demand answers, but people kind of knew Granger was out there. He had been telling Robert for weeks that he was going to go on this 42-month trip. He wrote a straightforward letter to his parents. He changed his will. This was not a situation of a kidnapping or necessarily even someone who was trying to self-harm or run off, right? He had a plan and he told everyone about it. So it doesn't really make sense for the police to have to make up finding remains that are his. Let's talk about telepathic communication. Doesn't the fact that Granger said he was telepathically talking to aliens through his dreams pretty much enough to solve this case? I mean, isn't that clear evidence of Granger's delusion that he said, his mind and the minds of the beings from outer space were talking to him? Doesn't that sound like a crazy person? Well, maybe and probably, but not necessarily. Back in the 1970s, when everything was cool and people were more open to psychic phenomena, two physicists suggested it might be possible to establish psychic links across great distances, enabling people to communicate with and even view entities across the globe or maybe even across the galaxy. This was called, quote, remote viewing. Sounds crazy, right? But being the 1970s, the United States government in the form of the Department of Defense and the CIA were interested and launched something called Project Stargate. If you've seen the movie The Men Who Stare at Goats, you know what we are talking about. The official position from the government is that nothing came out of that project, but that it was a failure. But conspiracy theories abound that in reality it worked quite well and continues to this day. Whatever the case, one interesting note. To boost the supposed psychic powers of the remote viewers, the military prescribed them with a performance-enhancing drug, LSD. One doctor working on the project stumbled upon a barrel with 700 million doses of LSD inside. The street value of that LSD was $1 billion.
That's a lot of
LSD. They must have been seeing things all the way into another galaxy with that LSD.
And it's crazy. I mean, let's just talk about what the government was doing. Number one, if you guys haven't seen Wormwood, which is the documentary on Netflix that talks about the CIA's experimentation with LSD, you need to watch it. This whole project basically fell apart when the events of Wormwood occurred. But the CIA and these people, they were crazy, and they were testing on all sorts of people without their knowledge. It got so bad that a directive went out from the director of the CIA that they were not to spike the punch bowls at holiday parties with LSD, because that's the kind of thing they were doing. They were giving LSD to people just to see what they would do and see whether or not, they could control people with LSD, how it would affect their minds. And in this case, with this Project Stargate, whether or not it would open them up to be able to see other things. And the whole idea was, what's better than a satellite? If you could literally, it's almost like a Google map thing where you do the street view, right? And you're like walking around on the street view with your Google map and looking at the house that you're going to look at next week. Well, that's what they wanted. They wanted to be able to have these people who were remote viewing into Soviet bases. And not just looking at them from space, but looking at them from the inside. And like, I'm walking down the hallway, and they keep the aliens in room 307, and the proton bombs are in this room over here. Like, they wanted to be able to do that. And look, they invested some real money and effort into this. Depending on who you ask, how seriously they took this is questionable. The name of the movie is The Men Who Stare at Goats, which gives you an idea that there's some mocking going on here. And the project eventually was canceled, but it went on for a while. I mean, we're talking decades here, where the CIA and the Department of Defense are trying to figure out whether or not this was possible. So imagine that it is. Imagine that it is possible for certain people to telepathically communicate with others or see across time and space, whatever. I know it sounds crazy, but just imagine it's true. If anybody could do that, it might be somebody like Granger, whose mind worked in a different way, who obviously had a different kind of intelligence, who looked and thought about things in a different way. And guess what? He was taking a lot of LSD. So if LSD actually works, if the theory behind the project has any validity, you could imagine that Granger is the kind of person who it would have been effective with. So, I mean, this is crazy. This is crazy. I get it's crazy. Don't write us a bunch of mean emails talking about how crazy this is. But, hey, it's October. Open your mind. This is an interesting thing that just happened to be going on in the United States government at the same time that Granger is having these experiences.
Brett, before we move on, I am so excited to talk about our sponsor, Green Chef. You guys know how busy we are, and I'm sure all of you. We work all day, rush home to kids who are hungry, and it's hard to get a healthy meal on the table, but not when you have Green Chef in your corner. I am so excited to make tonight. I had the crispy southern chicken. My kids gobbled it up, and it took just 30 minutes to prepare and put on the table. It saves me money, it saves me time, and it helps me in my busy lifestyle.
Alice, half the thing that stops me from cooking is having to decide what to eat, having to find a recipe, having to get all the ingredients. But Green Chef takes care of all of that. You can avoid the long lines at the grocery store and get fresh, premium ingredients delivered right to your door. And since Green Chef's ingredients are pre-portioned, you'll actually be reducing food waste by at least 25%. And Green Chef has something for everybody, whether you're keto, paleo, vegan, vegetarian, gluten-free, pescatarian, or you just want to eat more balanced meals. You will find it all with Green Chef.
And Green Chef is now owned by HelloFresh, and with a wider array of meal plans to choose from, there's something for everyone. I love switching between the brands, and now all of you can enjoy both brands at a discount on us. Go to greenchef.com/prosecutors125 and use code prosecutors125 to get $125 off, including free shipping. That's greenchef.com/prosecutors125 and use code prosecutors125. Find out for yourself why Green Chef is the #1 meal kit for eating well.
So while we're talking about things that would disprove Granger's statements, you may be thinking of one that's very obvious. He said he was only going on a 42-month journey, but this was in 1980. It's 2021. I'm not very good at math, but I can tell you it's been more than 42 months since Granger disappeared. And in fact, the town was really interested in this 42 number. everybody in town knew what Granger had said. They knew he said he was going to come back in 42 months. So you can bet as the day was coming closer to when this 42 months would be up, people started getting excited and they got really interested. Is Granger going to show up? This was before the truck was found, so nobody knew anything about that. Some people, I'm sure, thought this was all some big hoax or some big game that Granger was playing, and he was going to walk into town one way or the other. But the date came, and the date went, and months continued to pass, and Granger did not appear, and this was a great disappointment to a lot of people, but it was not a surprise to Robert, because Granger had explained to him that the trip was 42 months for him. But it wasn't 42 months for everybody else. Because this is where the theory of relativity comes in, and the speed of light, and the speed of the spacecraft that he would be on. 42 months would pass for him, but much more time would pass on Earth. And what Granger told Robert is 100% true. So let's talk about this. We're going to get a little nerdy here. I had to pull up my pencil and paper to work some of this out. But there is an equation for time dilation that you can use. So it's T equals T0 divided by 1 minus V2 over C2, and then you take the square root of that whole equation. So that's your basic thing. So essentially, V2
Obviously,
is your velocity.
Brett, for those of us who have forgotten about the equation of time dilation, thank you for refreshing our memory.
You're welcome, Alice. I wouldn't want someone to not be able to do this in their head if they're interested. So you got your velocity, how fast you're traveling, and you're going to divide it by the speed of light. And because of our current physics, which is wrong, but our current physics tells us that we can't travel faster than the speed of light. So your velocity number is never going to be greater than the speed of light. So as you approach the speed of light, this equation will tell you how much time is passing for you versus how much time is passing for them. And I have already done the calculations for you. So let's imagine that Granger is traveling at 99.7% of the speed of light. And this is an alien spaceship, and these guys got to get around the galaxy. So they got to be getting pretty close to the speed of light. So let's assume it's that. 42 months for him would be 45 years for us. So if he was traveling at that speed, we can expect him to be back pretty soon. 45 years after 1980 would be 2025. So the people on the island should be paying attention to that. But Robert, when he talked to Granger, got the feeling that Granger would not be back until Robert was dead and gone. And if he did come back, it would be his grandchildren who were seeing Granger, not Robert. So let's up the speed a little bit. If the aliens can get their spacecraft to travel at 99.9% the speed of light, then Granger will not be back until 2057. So the 42 months for him will be, 77 years for us. If they are able to travel at 99.99% of the speed of light, he will not return until 2228. And every little percentage that you go up on the speed of light increases that number exponentially, as you can see. So at 99.99% speed of light, he's already 250 years essentially out. So none of us will be around for when Granger comes back, if that is the case, if he is actually traveling that fast. Now, some of you may be asking, is he actually doing that? Is he actually traveling that fast, that close to the speed of light? How could you do that? How is that possible? Well, it's not really possible under our current physics, because basically you would need an unlimited amount of energy to travel that fast. But I think most people basically agree that we are so rudimentary in our understanding of physics that if you did have an alien race, and imagine, for instance, I'm going to go on a little bit of alien rant here. You've got all those, I know there are those of you out there who are like, this is ridiculous. Why are you guys talking about aliens? There's no such thing as aliens, despite the fact that, the Pentagon just released some stuff about 6 months ago that nobody paid attention to. I don't know why everybody just missed this, about all these weird things that the military has encountered and all these UFOs they've encountered that no one can explain. But anyway, we've already discovered all these planets rotating around all these stars. There are millions of them that could support life. Some of them have been around for millions of years longer than the Earth. So imagine an alien civilization that is millions of years more advanced than we are. I mean, are you telling me that they're still limited by, the Einsteinian physics? I mean, we all believed in Newtonian physics until Einstein came around. And then Einstein basically said, no, that's wrong. It's this, right? And Einstein's physics better describes the world at great distances and great speeds. But most people think that it's a good approximation, but it's not entirely accurate. And that's why you have things like string theory and quantum theory and all this other stuff. And I'm not going to get into all that. But all I'm saying is you could imagine an alien technology completely foreign to us that would enable them to do something like this, even though for us, obviously, it's not only impossible now, but it feels like it will always be impossible. And we can talk about more of this on a Patreon Get Vocal soon. So if you want to talk about this more, join our Patreon.
Brett, you know so much about aliens and things that I know nothing about.
It's just random stuff. I know a lot about random things.
You do.
So aliens
and
are
it's
a random
fascinating.
thing.
I know, it's absolutely fascinating. I'm sitting here with my mouth, open, trying to remember what a square root looks like.
It's that little check mark thing.
Yeah, I got it. No, I got it. I took AP Calculus at a very long time ago. Very long time ago. Oh, my goodness. Well, with all of that math, I bet you guys can't wait to do the math and hear about our theories. So one theory is that Granger disappeared into South America and joined the intelligence services. Granger disappeared, so of course there are people who believe that he decided to start a new life. We hear this all the time. We hear it in all our disappearance cases because I think we are hopeful that someone continues to live and is happy and has found their peace somewhere. The fact that Granger hasn't been found, that there's been no definitive test that the remains that may or may not have been found were his, it's a possibility that he continues to live somewhere. The way this theory goes is that Granger had spent some time in Colombia, and he had often spoken of traveling there one day. But we've already kind of said this. If Granger were going to disappear, would he really leave $10,000 behind and all of his other belongings? Remember, he changed his will for when he departed. He didn't take anything with him. Granger was also described as being very close to his family, and, he was a single man who had no real ties holding him down. So if he wanted to move, he could have just moved. He didn't need to disappear. He didn't have all these obligations in life that he, felt all this pressure he had to leave. If he wanted to go, he could go. Of course, if instead he joined the intelligence services, then maybe he couldn't tell anyone he was leaving. Maybe that was part of the plan. They needed someone who was just off the face of the planet so that they could, do their super secret intelligence. And maybe part of that plan is that he needed to absolutely disappear.
And do those people actually exist? I always feel like that's one of those things that's a myth, that there are these intelligence spies or whatever, that in order to be spies, they have to fake their death or something like that.
Let me tell you this, Brett. If I ran my own country, I would tell everyone in the world that I had secret spies all over the world and not have a single force.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. You just want people to believe it. But I would think if you wanted Granger to be a spy, he would just be a spy, Like you would just hire him to work at the museum, but what he's really doing is his spy stuff. He didn't have to disappear. He didn't have to fake his death. That's the thing.
That's a really good point, right? Because when you need someone to disappear, it's when they have so many ties holding them down. They have jobs, they have children, they have, people they're taking care of, they have spouses, and that's why they need to disappear to start this new life of intelligence seeking. But he literally could disappear the next day, which he did, and no one could track him, right? There was no one to track him.
Yeah, to me, it's a sexy theory, but I just don't know why he would go about it this way. I don't know why the intelligence services would want him to do it this way. And if it's not that, I don't know why he would just disappear. He would, like you said, he could just move to Vancouver if he wanted to. Then he could still talk to his parents, but he could start a new life. Or he could just move to Colombia. If he wanted to move to Colombia, he could just say, hey guys, I'm going to Colombia. I'll write you a letter, this whole notion that he would need to cut everything off. He is close to his family, but it's close to your sister and your brother and your parents, not your, like you said, not your wife and your kids that mean you can never leave the area you're at because your wife really likes it. And so you have to fake your death. He didn't have that. He had none of that. He didn't have a bunch of debt. He didn't have a bunch of problems. He wasn't facing any issues, he was basically living his life the way he wanted to. So he could have just gone if he wanted to. And I don't think he had to fake anything. Which leads to, I think what may be one of the most popular theories, and that's that Granger just committed suicide. And it's possible, of course, that he was, either suffering from mental illness or depression. I mean, look, you have sort of prima facie case of mental illness here when he thinks he's talking to aliens. If he's not talking to aliens, that would be troubling to me. If Alice told me tomorrow that she was talking to aliens, I would be concerned about Alice and her mental state. So that's obviously possible. And it's possible he was depressed. His family has said that he was lonely. I mean, he didn't have a family outside of, his parents and his sister. And, it's possible he just decided he didn't want to live anymore, that the things that he had going for him were great, but they weren't that great. But rather than sort of go out the way most people might, he decided to do something extraordinary. So he comes up with this crazy story to explain his death, and then he drives off to this remote area on the side of a mountain where he thinks maybe nobody will ever find him, and he just blows himself up. And that kills him, and a mystery is born, and that's the kind of way somebody like him would love to go out. The problem with this is the people who were closest to him say that he wasn't depressed and he wasn't sad, and if he had any loneliness, it was, sort of the typical thing and not a big deal, that he often said he would never kill himself, that wasn't something he would want to do. When it comes to mental illness, yes, as we said, Granger did say he was hearing voices, but those voices seem to be in his dreams, not in his head. He was 32 when he disappeared, and as we've talked about before, it's unlikely that you would have the first onset of schizophrenia at that age, though obviously it is not impossible. Still, it just doesn't seem as though Granger was really suffering from any definable mental illness that would have led to his death. And so for me, this is just a little unfulfilling. I admit there's a lot going for it. He does get his affairs in order. He writes a note. You have the remains of the truck and the bones, which might indicate a suicide. But it seems a little bit as though it doesn't really fit with what everyone is saying about Granger. Now, obviously, you never know what's going on in people's heads, and you don't know what's going on in Granger's head. But I just feel like when Granger says this stuff about aliens, Robert knew him better than anybody. And Robert thought he believed it. So I kind of think he believed it too, even if it weren't true.
Right. And obviously everyone reacts differently, but that letter he wrote his parents really does not sound like a suicide letter. Oftentimes in suicide letters, you'll see, questioning like, why does my life have to be like this? Or why, wanting answers why, or saying that I can't go on with the current state of things. But his letter is so matter of fact. There's no hesitation.
Or reassuring the people you leave behind that this is not about you, this is not your fault, there's nothing you can do. I mean, there's all sorts of things you might see in a typical suicide note this is obviously not a typical note. If it is a suicide note, it is not typical.
It is not a typical note. No. If Granger didn't commit suicide, then it is possible that Granger died in an accident. Granger was known to have a supply of dynamite that he used to clear stumps on the family farm. Is it possible that he loaded up his truck with dynamite, intent on using it to blast him into space to, meet up with the spaceship? That honestly seems highly unlikely. Granger may have been eccentric. He may have been saying that he was talking to, aliens, but he was no fool. He was a genius. He understood how, dynamite worked and how gears and engines and combustion worked. This is his wheelhouse. And he would have known that filling up his truck with dynamite and trying to blast into space was just suicide. Now, on the other hand, and let me point out that never in his conversations with Robert did he say that the aliens told him that Granger had to meet him halfway or something like that, or he had a way of getting there. Always his story was consistent. They are bringing the storm so that they can come pick me up. Not that he's going to meet them halfway, like at Saturn or something. On the other hand, Granger was going up a mountain in the middle of a fierce storm. He clearly wasn't worried about it. Remember, he wasn't properly dressed for it. He was just going about his normal business in his light jacket. Could it be possible that his truck was struck by lightning, igniting the dynamite he still had in his truck, causing the explosion? You might be thinking that's too many what ifs and literally lightning striking kind of chances. But a similar incident has happened before and in Canada. The John B. King, which is a drill boat, was drilling holes for dynamite in Ontario when lightning struck it, igniting the dynamite and killing 30 people when it did so. So it has happened before. He's known to have had dynamite, so maybe he wasn't intending to light it on fire, but rather the storm of the century occurred and struck the dynamite while he was driving the car. But you might be saying, what about the truck? Granger's truck was, remember, Pepto-Bismol pink, bright pink. The truck they found was blue. But as we noted earlier, Granger's truck wasn't originally pink. He had painted it pink. The resulting explosion and fire may have maybe burned the paint away, revealing its colors underneath. But this doesn't fit either, because according to Granger's friends, the truck wasn't blue before he painted it either. So where does this blue truck come from? Nevertheless, given the license plate found at the scene, the truck probably was Granger's, because Occam's razor. If you find a truck blasted to pieces, even if it's the wrong color, who knows how it could have gotten to that state where a wheel is 60 feet up in the air. If the license plate that was attached to Granger's car is found near this blasted truck, it probably means this truck was Granger's. If that's his truck, maybe Granger died along with whatever happened to the truck. But it's also possible that the aliens took him and they blew up the truck to cover their tracks, and Granger is not where the truck is. In fact, he is just fine.
And that brings us to the last theory, which is then this is a straightforward case that Granger told us exactly what he was doing, and he did it. He joined the aliens. And I gotta say, I mean, the truck and the bone fragments obviously give me pause for obvious reasons, because it's difficult to explain that, particularly the bone fragments, even though they've never been directly tied to Granger. The simplest idea is that those are Granger's and he died in that explosion, but there are very few of them, if they ever existed, to cite the conspiracy theories. But the thing that brings me back to the aliens again and again is that storm. The storm that Granger predicted a month before it happened, that it would be the worst storm the area had ever seen. A storm so violent, so loud, so omnipresent that this spaceship could come down and pick Granger up and nobody would see it. That's how bad the storm was going to be. And this is 1980. You can barely predict the weather a month from now. Today, with all the technology we have and the satellites and everything else, you can barely predict what's going to happen in a month. That Granger was able to pinpoint this day is when they're coming, there's going to be this storm, and it happened, that's crazy. I mean, maybe it's just a coincidence, and maybe it's one of those situations where it was the worst possible thing that could happen, because then Granger, who's suffering from delusions, this storm comes on the day he predicted, and he's like, here we go, eureka. And he heads up that mountain and forgets about the dynamite in the back of his truck and gets his truck blown up. Now, look, this would have had to have been a ton of dynamite to do this to this truck. I've seen cases before where people have attempted to blow up people with dynamite, and a couple sticks of dynamite aren't going to do it. They might kill you in the truck, but they're not going to blow your truck up. To accomplish this would have taken a ton of dynamite. I mean, he would have had to use every stick of dynamite he had. And interestingly, Robert says that he's 99% sure that he saw that dynamite at Granger's house after this event. So he would have had to have gotten some dynamite from somewhere else. And obviously, dynamite's not the kind of thing you just pick up at the local store. They keep a record of that stuff. So if Granger had bought a couple cases of dynamite to go blow himself up on the side of the mountain, somebody would have known about it. I mean, look, kind of come to the end here, Alice. I don't know what you think, but this is one where I choose to believe that Granger is flying around on that spaceship, even as we speak, seeing the wonders of the galaxy, and he's going to come back in 200 years or whatever to great acclaim and the world will finally recognize him as the genius that he is.
Well, Brett, I'm a person who follows the science and who follows the facts, and I think the math works out here. Honestly, of all the cases we've done, without any sort of joking, I think the most likely thing here is that the aliens did it. It was aliens.
It was aliens. I'm glad I could convince you of that, Alice.
It was the math.
It was all the math. It was the math. I mean, what can you say? Like, I did a lot of math in this case, and I don't really do math very well, so everyone should just assume that I'm correct on the basis of that alone. No, I mean, look, in all seriousness, Granger lived an extraordinary life. I'm glad that he gets recognition because of the way he disappeared or he died or whatever was going on with him. I hope that Granger was not struggling with mental illness. I hope he was not struggling with depression. I hope that he did not end up in a place where he felt like this was the only way out. And even if that maybe is the most likely scenario, to me, there's something about what he did and how enigmatic it was. And that storm, man, I can't get past that storm. That just makes me, I want to believe, as they say in the X-Files. And so I am going to come down firmly on the view that Granger is with the aliens. Well, Alice, do you have anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
I don't think there's anything to add when you end an episode it was aliens.
It was aliens. So there you go. All of you guys have been wanting an alien case. You got it. Well, let us know how much you disagree with us. prosecutorspod@gmail.com, @prosecutorspod for all your social media. Check us out on the gallery. We now have a subreddit on Reddit. So if you're on Reddit and you want to join some of our listeners and discuss the cases, you can do that as well. This has been an awesome case, something a little bit different for October, but nevertheless, still a disappearance, still a mystery. And I hope you guys learned a little bit more about it. Check out those sources we talked about earlier. There's a lot of great discussions, particularly from Canadian podcasts on Granger Taylor. I know Dark Poutine did an episode on this as well. So check those out, see what you think, and let us know. Do you think Granger went off to join the aliens, or do you think it's something a little bit more prosaic? But nevertheless, I mean, whatever happened to Granger in the end is a pretty extraordinary thing. I mean, you don't see totally destroyed trucks in craters very often in cases. So just a great mystery and a great story, and we probably will never know exactly what happened. Well, that is all we have for you today. We'll be back next week. Next week we have something a little bit less enjoyable, a little bit less whimsical next week for you. We got some pretty brutal murders, but murders that go right along with the Halloween season. So until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the prosecutors.
I'm sorry, my mind's going a million miles per hour because when your child throws up into your mouth, it just really, it sharpens the mind, shall we say. It sharpens the mind and lots of other things. Yeah, because it's like the ultimate offense, but like they didn't do it on purpose.
You're amazing, Alice.
Oh, I'm not amazing. You should have seen my face.
So amazing.
It was utter horror, and then I had to cover it up and laugh because I had scared my own child with my utter disgust of him.
You're impeccable.
Canadian case, yes.
Another Canadian case, yes. Maple syrup, poutine.
Poutine. Oh my gosh,
Poutine.
the first time I had poutine was at midnight at a Canadian wedding, and it was, poutine might taste awesome on its own, but after a night of dancing at midnight was the best thing I've ever tasted.
I like gravy and I like fries. So
It's delightful.